Tuomas Iisalo is the next head coach of the Memphis Grizzlies. We know that. But he's got some open assistant positions. And I think that assistant coaching staff needs all heart. Needs some grit. Need a little more grind to it. You picking up what I'm putting down? Let's talk about it. Coming up, Locked On Grizzlies.
You are Locked On Grizzlies, your daily Memphis Grizzlies podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, everyone, and welcome back to Locked On Grizzlies. It's Damichael Cole, beat writer for the Commercial Appeal, right here in Memphis, Tennessee, without my co-host Joe Mullinex on today. So guess what? I got to do the unders because it's Friday, and we got to get down on Friday. Shout out to Rebecca Black. Shout out to Joe Mullinex. But thank you guys for tuning in with me on Locked On Grizzlies on today. This episode is brought to you by Prizepicks. Download the app today and use the code LOCKEDONNBA to get $50 instantly when you play your first $5 lineup. Prizepicks, run your game. Make sure you continue to like, comment, rate, review, subscribe to Locked On Grizzlies. Appreciate you guys for tuning in with us each and every single day. And first off, look, just thank you for making Locked On Grizzlies your first listen every day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team each and every single day. We got a little episode to talk about the assistant coaches on this Friday. As we said at the top of the show, right, there are some openings on this staff that will be filled in short order. Simply put, Tuomas Iisalo, his spot became open when he became the interim coach. So that was one opening. And then a couple other coaches were let go at the same time as Taylor Jenkins. Noah LaRoche being one of those coaches, Patrick St. Andrews being the other. At the time that we talked about it, Noah LaRoche, he was pretty much a player development guy who had a decent hand in the offense. So that's part of the reason why he was let go. And then Patrick St. Andrews was brought in last season, or the season before this one, and he kind of had the role of the defensive coordinator this season. So we saw, some slippage on the defensive end or whatever the case may be. But anyways, those two guys were let go. That opened up two more slots on the coaching staff. So right now you have three. Now, I expect that there won't just be three openings in my opinion. We'll see what else happens, and I'll try to find out. And just stay tuned to our coverage here with the other spots, right? You got other guys on that staff who basically filled in, other guys who were hired either before this season or either before last season. Remember, the Grizzlies pretty much revamped the assistant coaching staff where there were a couple promotions. Eric Schmidt, Jason Marsh, they were promoted. And there were some others who came from other places. Joe Boylan, Patrick Mutombo were among those brought in. Anthony Carter was brought in a year ago. We'll talk about him a little bit more in this episode as we go on. And then, that's kind of how the coaching staff took shape this season. So we'll see how much or how many of those guys will be retained in Tuomas Iisalo's tenure here going forward, and we'll see what he does with the three openings. But I got a suggestion, because today's episode is going to be about potential candidates. We're going to break it down into three different segments, three different types of candidates. So make sure you stay tuned, because some of these names you probably haven't heard anywhere else unless you tune in over to the Commercial Appeal. So you go check out my story at commercialappeal.com, where I also break down the idea of the Grizzlies adding actually these names right here. So the story is going to give you a more in-depth breakdown on why I say these names, but you get it in audio form right here on Locked On Grizzlies. So without further ado, let's get into it. Let's get into it, because the first name is the one that I talked about in the opening. And look, if you don't know who I'm talking about, you're probably you're new to the Grizzlies wave a little bit, but that's okay. That's why we're here, because we're gonna get your hip. We're gonna put you on. And that's Tony Allen. Bring back all heart, grit, grind. Put him on the coaching staff. Now, let's get into it, because I'm not just spitballing. I'm not just saying Tony Allen's name just to say it or anything like that. Here's the thing. When I think about Tony Allen, the number one reason his name comes up for me, because in this first segment, I'm talking about, I think, a key addition to any coaching staff. And we're talking about the Grizzlies coaching staff right now, but you need some type of experienced NBA former NBA player on your staff. Now the Grizzlies have that, and I got it. We're going to talk about here coming up in a second. But I always want that on one of the staffs, and the Grizzlies didn't have much NBA experience on many previous staffs of Taylor Jenkins, dating back even during some of the most successful seasons, 2021, 2022, and 2022, 2023. But with all that being said, Tony Allen, put him on the coaching staff. Number one, he's going to get through to the players. And there is just something different always when a guy can look at you and say, I've done what I'm talking about. Tony Allen can look at those dudes and say, play defense. I was first team all defense. I was a 6-time all defensive team selection. I'm widely regarded as one of the best perimeter defenders to ever lace them up. Who's going to say he doesn't know what he's talking about when he's talking about what he's talking about on the defensive end? Number two, there's the motivational factor. A huge part of coaching is having that voice that gets through to players. And that's why a lot of times when coaches are at the end of their tenure, you hear people say, oh, did they lose the locker room and things like that? Because when you're getting through the guys, it reflects on the court. Tony Allen can get through the players. Tony Allen is a natural public speaker. The OG Grizzlies fans will know it. You've seen the videos of Tony Allen speaking in juvenile detention centers, speaking in jails, speaking at schools, speaking, in all different types of rooms. It comes natural to Tony Allen. And, of course, speaking to NBA players, he can go up to the players when they mess up and say, I've done that. He can go up to the players when they have success and say, I've done that. And I overcame this to get to that. And he has stories. That's the number two things for me. And then number three, this one is the last one, and it's pretty simple. Tony Allen was a film junkie when he played in the league. And some of you've heard the stories. You've seen the videos of him, walking around with the MacBook, getting off the plane, watching film on a whole MacBook, carrying it around, basically like it's an iPad or a tablet or something. But he was a film junkie when he played. Studied Kevin Durant to a T. Studied Kobe Bryant to a T. Studying these basketball players and passing that knowledge down to the Grizzlies players would be very beneficial, especially on the defensive end. If you're talking about a guy who you could bring in who could really spice up things from a knowledge standpoint on the defensive end, you got a guy in your backyard. And I don't think it would be hard. Tony Allen's already around the team. He's already, working with the Grizzlies in a much smaller capacity, but he's around the organization. We see him at some games sometimes. Many of you see him, on Grind City Media with Chris Vernon on the Chris Vernon Show and things like that. Like, he is right here. Very easy to get to. He does community work still with the Grizzlies. He does community work, with Zach Randolph and others still in the city. So he's very in tune to Memphis to this day. Wouldn't be hard, I don't think, to convince him. But he's a name that stands out to me. And since we're talking about former NBA players, I don't want this segment to go on without mentioning one Anthony Carter. With Anthony Carter. Anthony Carter, he's been on this staff for 2 seasons now, right? And he could technically fill that former NBA player role and whatever the case may be. But who says you can't have multiple of those guys? The thing about Anthony Carter is, since he's been here, you talk to the Grizzlies players, Yugi Kawamura, Gigi Jackson, Zaire Williams when he was here, Vince Williams, so many different guys. I mean, the list goes on. But it is very eye-opening when you talk to guys and the assistant coach whose name often comes up when he says, man, he's the guy that helped me overhaul this. I mean, Gigi Jackson, I touched on it a couple times now. He was never really known as a shooter coming up through the ranks or whatever the case may be. Gets to the league, boom, shooting 35% from three-point range out of the gate. I'm like, where did that? South Carolina people, like, where'd that come from? He gets here. Anthony Carter says, you need to put some more arc on your shot. Put a little feathery touch to it. And he, works on some other things mechanically, gets higher arc on that shot. And now Gigi Jackson is shooting the ball as confident as ever. And that's saying something. You've seen Gigi Jackson. Gigi Jackson doesn't struggle for confidence too much. But shout out to Anthony Carter for really being, a helping hand and maximizing, or at least at this point of his career, enhancing Gigi Jackson's ability as a shooter. But it goes on. Vince Williams has said similar things, and other players have talked about it as well. But he also has that NBA experience, that NBA perspective. 13 years in the league, played point guard, played on some really good teams, played with Carmelo Anthony, Allen Iverson. So he's been in some different types of locker rooms, and he's had a voice in those locker rooms. And he's also been known over the course of his career as a player development guy. He came from Miami before he got to the Grizzlies. That was how he made his name. And he stayed true to that with the Grizzlies and helping develop these guys. So I only talk about Anthony Carter because of the fact that you don't know. You don't know if he's Iisalo's guy, so to speak, or whatever the case may be. But when Taylor Jenkins was let go, he was one of the guys that was not let go at that time. He's one of those guys that the players keep bringing up unprovoked as well. I'm not asking them, hey, what do you think about Anthony Carter? No, they are talking about Anthony Carter. So with that being said, I think, look, if you're saying, hey, we should only have one former NBA player on the staff and you already got Anthony Carter there, just stay cool. But if you could add another guy, anybody, you got a guy in the backyard. The defense having some issues lately. We talked a lot towards the end of the season just about the energy, the effort. I know a guy that can fix that. I know a guy that pretty much got through most of his career before at least after his ACL injury in Boston, got through most of his career just playing with heart, playing with grit, playing with grind. And that's one Tony Allen. If the Grizzlies looking for a former player to make an impact on the staff, look no further than Tony Allen. That's the guy that I'm thinking about. What if they want to go after an experienced coach? Guy who has some experience in the league, guy who's been through the trenches or whatever the case may be as an NBA coach. I got a couple of names I want to throw out there. Let's get to that coming up here on Locked On Grizzlies. But before we get to that, today's episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by our friends over at Prizepicks. Here's the thing about Prizepicks. Basketball season is at its peak right now. And with the playoffs heating up, now's the time to put your sports knowledge to the test with Prizepicks, the top platform for daily fantasy sports. Prizepicks makes it easy. You just pick more or less on at least 2 player projections and you're in. Whether it's points, rebounds, or assists, you've got a shot to win up to 2,000 times your entry. Look, this week, I'm keeping it simple. I'm waiting I'm waiting to see who's going to win this Boston Celtics, New York Knicks series. So I'm going to say, look, Jason Tatum's out. So Jaylen Brown for more than 26 points. And then we're going to say, okay, Karl Anthony Towns for more than 7 rebounds. That's the route we're going to go on Prizepicks on this game for Game 6. The app takes less than 60 seconds to use, and I love how I can mix and match basketball players with other sports like baseball or even esports in the same lineup. And Tuesdays are even better with Taco Tuesday, where player projections are discounted up to 25% for even more value. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNBA to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNBA to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prizepicks, run your game. What if the Grizzlies want to go after a coach who can say, I've been the lead man on the bench? There's a lot of names out there. Now, let's run through kind of why that is the case. This has been an unusual kind of approach to the coaching searches or whatever you want to call it. And I say unusual because teams are prioritizing just retaining their guys. The Denver Nuggets right now with David Adelman, we'll see how that situation works out, but he's coached them solidly. Wouldn't be surprised if he's retained and named the full-time coach of the Denver Nuggets. But if you take him out of the equation, Sacramento Kings fired Mike Brown earlier this season. Guess what? Doug Christie took over as interim coach. Doug Christie's the coach now, full-time. We know what happened in Memphis with Taylor Jenkins, and then we know Tuomas Iisalo took over in that role as well. And then what about with Mitch Johnson? Down with San Antonio Spurs, took over for Greg Popovich, who was ill, had the stroke and things like that. Mitch Johnson gets the job as the next coach of the San Antonio Spurs, and when many people thought was one of the most coveted jobs out there. So teams are prioritizing retaining their guys. So what that means is, to me, I thought where we were with the names that were out there, you got a bunch of former championship type coaches that were available this summer, and teams are saying, we don't want leftovers anymore. We want fresh blood. We want something new. We want something innovative. We want something different. We're tired of just playing Russian roulette and just, let's go get the guy that was used to be the coach there but got fired, and let's see if he can, a different roster, different makeup can change some things around. They're tired of that. They want to go get something different, and that's what we're seeing. So that puts these veteran coaches in a position where either they're gonna say, man, I'm above being an assistant. I'm just gonna sit on this cash that I got from when I was fired at my last stop, or they're gonna say, I missed the grind. I mean, I might not get a head coaching job, but I missed the grind. Let me get out there. Let me just get on the bench and be a lead assistant somewhere, and we'll see where things go from there. That's the coach that the Grizzlies are looking for. Tuomas Iisalo, as we talked about, he doesn't have a lot of NBA experience. We talked about it when he took over the job. He joked about it, the fact that he was learning, certain NBA and American basketball rules, early in the season. And that's fair, right? He's coached basketball in Europe and played mostly in Europe all of his basketball life pretty much. So he comes over to the States, and there are some small adjustments, physicality and the style of play and things that are emphasized, whatever the case may be. But with all that being said, it's still basketball at the end of the day. And I think, just to make this process go smooth, when you talk about assistant coaches, you go get a coach with a lot of NBA experience just to put on the bench beside him. Not to say Iisalo doesn't have experience. He'll tell you firsthand. I mean, he may not have a bunch of NBA playoff experience, but he's got a lot of playoff experience in Europe. So here's the thing for me. I'm going to throw a couple names out here, then we're going to move on to our third segment as well. The first name I want to throw out there is the name that I like the most. Frank Vogle. You talk about a guy who, you can debate about his offensive struggles with the Lakers, his offensive, shortcomings with the Suns at time and whatnot. But Frank Vogle is one of the best defensive minds, period. When you lost Taylor Jenkins, and I don't care how stubborn you want to be and how you felt about the end of Taylor Jenkins' tenure, you can't look me in my face and say Taylor Jenkins wasn't a solid defensive coach. You can look me in my face and say, oh, he wasn't elite. I'll let you have it. But every year we saw the Grizzlies line up, outside of pretty much this one, they were, and even for most of this season, I take that back. Even for most of this season, they just had slippage after the All-Star break. But he has routinely throughout upper tier NBA defenses. You can complain about the open three-point shots they give up from time to time, but the defense is predicated on limiting paint scoring, which they've been great at. And a lot of times the guys who are beating them from three-point range aren't necessarily the great shooters on the team. It's Herb Jones and Derek Jones and those type of guys having career nights when the Grizzlies leave them open. And Rui Hachimura is one that many fans will remember in that Lakers series. But with all that being said, there's problems with it. Frank Vogle is a defensive mastermind. And if you're looking at the Grizzlies staff right now, you're saying we need to go get a defensive whiz. So that's going to take some pressure off Iisalo, right? He's coming in. We talked about the heavy emphasis on pick and roll, the offensive net rating numbers that he put up in Europe. Allow him to kind of focus on taking this offense to a whole nother level. Bring in a guy where you can say, hey, look, this is how I want my defense to look at the end of the day. I want my defense to be physical. I want my defense to be strong at the point of attack. I want my defense to protect the rim. You do the rest. You do the rest. Frank Vogel said, okay, no problem. Indiana Pacers, when Frank Vogel were there, elite defensively. Los Angeles Lakers, elite defensively. Won a championship, the bubble championship, right? The Suns are a different case, but check this out. The Suns fired Frank Vogel after one season. If you look at how that defense compared to the one this year, a year after they fired him with Mike Budenholzer, that defense was much better, which led to that team ending up being much better. And that team ended up being, I think the Suns were the 6th seed that year. Didn't even have to play in the play in. And this season, the Suns don't even qualify for the play in. So we're talking about a case of they didn't know how good they had it with Frank Vogel, honestly. And that's tough to say based on how things turned out in Phoenix. Another name that I want to throw out there real quick, James Borrego. If you remember James Borrego, he was the coach of the Charlotte Hornets, took over there, and had some success or whatever the case may be, whatever you want to call it. And they kind of fell off, towards the end of his tenure in Charlotte, and that was that. So we've seen some reports out there. He sounds like a guy who's going to get some NBA head coaching. He's going to get some opportunities. Now, he was on the New Orleans Pelicans staff this past season. I know I was talking about guys who, in this case, were pretty much sitting on the chair like Frank Vogel. He's collecting that cash for the Suns, chilling right now. James Borrego, 43 and 39 in his last season in Charlotte. 43 and 39 in Charlotte. Last season. 33 and 39 the year before that. 23, 42, 39, 43 year before that. The point is, those numbers compared to what we've seen the other years before he was in Charlotte and after that, makes him look like he didn't really get his due. And he's just one of the names out there to watch. He's going to get a lot of opportunities. He's going to get a lot of interest as a potential head coach in the NBA. So I think with the New Orleans Pelicans situation being, a little further right now, there's new management over there. Could be an opportunity for the Grizzlies to reach in and get a guy who's probably going to be a head coach back in the league soon. I like the idea of James Borrego. If you can poach him from New Orleans, being a name that stands out to me. What about some familiarity? There's some familiarity in Tuomas Iisalo's camp. There's a couple names that I want to throw out there for you guys. We're going to talk about that next coming up on Locked On Grizzlies. But before we get to those names, today's episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by Game Time. There's nothing like the NBA playoffs, the intensity, the buzzer beaters, the fans losing their mind. It's the kind of atmosphere that you must experience live. And this year's matchups are already delivered. So if you want in, Game Time makes it fast and easy to get seats, even for the biggest playoff game. Prices on the apps actually drop closer to tip-off. And with killer last-minute deals, panoramic seat views, and no surprise fees, Game Time is a total game changer. And look, I love the way that I can see my exact view before I buy the tickets. That's the best part to me. There are no surprises, and the app makes it very simple. It's just a couple taps, and then you're done. You don't got to worry about anything else. And then with Game Time Guarantee, a lot of people like Game Time Guarantee. You're getting the best deal, because if you find a better price in the same row and section out there somewhere else, you say, Game Time, what's up with this? They'll credit you 110% of the difference, just like that. So make sure you go take advantage of those opportunities right now. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed over at Game Time. Brother from another mother is a popular saying. We say that a lot around here. Say, what's up, my brother from another mother? What about my brother from another country? Tuomas Iisalo has a brother, and excuse me if I mispronounce the names here. I know I'll get the last name right at least. Jonas, excuse me. Maybe it's Jonas. Jonas Iisalo is Tuomas Iisalo's brother. Now, we don't see this a lot in the NBA. You might say, oh, brothers coaching together. He's a little bit younger. I think Tuomas Iisalo at this point is 42. His brother's 39. But check this out. At two of Tuomas Iisalo's previous stops, not with Paris, but the two teams that he coached, the two clubs, as they call it in Europe, the two clubs that he coached prior to Paris basketball, you know who his associate head coach was? It was his brother. His brother was his associate head coach. And I looked into Jonas Iisalo a little bit, found out some things. He's been recently a head coach over in Europe. Spent a lot of time coaching in Germany as well. It's well regarded, out there. You talk about the idea of bringing in familiarity. That's a name that stands out to me. Again, he comes from the same family tree, and he's someone to watch. Another name that I'm going to throw out there really quickly, and this is a more experienced name, Gordon Herbert. And when I say more experienced name, I don't know if he would make the move. FC Bayern Munich's coach over in Europe, but he's also now the head coach for the Canadian men's national team. That tells you how well regarded he is. He's taken over for Jordi Fernandez in that role as the next Canadian men's basketball national team coach. And we know that the Canadian men's national team, they're on a fast track talent-wise, right behind the U.S., trying to, with every other country, they're probably in the best position right now, at least from a talent standpoint, to give the USA a best matchup. And they entrusted this guy, Gordon Herbert, as the guy who's going to be the coach of the future. Now, as I said, he's 66 right now. So FC Bayern Munich in Europe, they play in the Euro League, and quite frankly, he makes some money over there. So it might not be easy to get him to come to the NBA, not to be an assistant coach while he's in head coach over there. But familiarity's there. This is a guy who played professional basketball once upon a time in Finland. And he also coached after his career over, was in Finland as well. Again, we just mentioned the EuroLeague tie-ins. These two do have tie-ins with each other. So you talk about a lot of times under Taylor Jenkins' tenure, we saw hires that, this guy was with him here, whether it was players on his developmental staff who were from his time with the Austin Spurs. I mean, the Texas Legends when he coached in the G League, right? When he used to be D League at that time. When Taylor Jenkins was a D League coach, there are players on the developmental staff of the Grizzlies that played for him at that time. There's also people like we mentioned, Patrick St. Andrews, the tie-ins that they have from their previous stops in Milwaukee together. So, that is a big part of this business. And there were others as well who were on the previous Grizzly staff who all had, some type of tie-in to Taylor Jenkins. I think it's always good. It doesn't have to be the most popular names when we're talking about familiarity. This is more, look, a coaching staff is big. And that's, I think it's okay to say, look, if you want to make a hire and it's a guy too that the coach is very familiar with, that he knows he's going to be in sync with, and also is going to help the team get better. That's very important too. But as long as that coach feels like that person can do that, if Tuomas Iisalo says, man, my brother, he's coaching out in Germany, he's coaching in Europe right now, he can get us to that next level. He can do it. He can help us out. He can help with the player development and things like that. I think that you trust him and you bring him in. If he says Gordon Herbert, I mean, you see the credentials. He's coaching FC Bayern Munich right now. He's now the new head coach for the Canadian men's national team. He's 66. If he wants to make that move, let's bring him in. So those are the names that I have for you. 6 names. Again, you go check out the story on commercialappeal.com. You get a more in-depth viewpoint on those 6 names and a little bit more. But let me know who you guys think. Throw some names out there to me as well. Who do you think are good options for the Grizzlies to consider for some of those assistant coaching openings? There's a lot of names out there to think about. And a lot more to choose from. So looking forward to what you guys suggest as well. Thank you for making Locked On Grizzlies your first listen today. For your second listen, make sure you go check out the Locked On NBA Game Night. Every game, every night, until an NBA champion is crowned. Get local analysis on a national scale. Find NBA Game Night on Locked On NBA on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Thank you guys for tuning in to Locked On Grizzlies with me on today. Me and Joe Mullinex will be back with you on Monday to continue to break down all things Memphis Grizzlies. Next week is going to be a big week for the Grizzlies. I'm anticipating this will be the week that we find out Jaren Jackson Jr. makes All-NBA, and we talk 100 times over about the ramifications of that decision. It's going to be close. I've said it enough. But we're going to talk about that and much more. You got some all-rookie team selections that have to be made sometime soon. Not sure the exact date yet on either of those all-team selections, but we'll find out soon, and we'll find out about much more. on Locked On Grizzlies. But until next time, remember that Locked On Grizzlies is free and available wherever you get your podcast. I'm Damichael Cole, and we'll see you on Locked On Grizzlies.